We are not financial advisors. This podcast is not financial advice. It's two friends talking about politics.
This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor.
Yes, this is not financial advice. No, not financial
Not
advice.
at all. But
Yeah.
stocks are risky. It's all a risk.
Mondays with Mike.
Mondays with Mike. Mondays with Mike.
So, on Friday, 10-10-25, 10-10-220, nostalgia, okay. The S&P 500 was down 2.7%. That's a lot.
It is a lot.
And this comes after Trump said that there was going to be 100% more tariffs on Chinese goods. Question 1, what does this bring the tariff rate to?
It varies, right, on the good, because some goods are being tariffed more than others. So steel, for instance, has a higher tariff. It varies, but at a minimum, it increases it by 100%, plus the reciprocal tariffs of 10%, and then I think there's an additional 20% of tariffs because of fentanyl, as was the justification. My understanding is it is around 130% to 155% of depending on the good. But that might change, right? It's not clear what the total amount is, but it definitely is different. It's not a uniform amount on all goods right now. There's actually very variable amounts. But what's clear is it is going way up. It's going way up from where it is, because they hammered out that trade deal that I guess is going to get thrown out the window, and we're back to 100% tariffs. The other thing though was that they're increasing port fees on all U.S. ships, so that's another big difference from the last time. Is China's increasing port fees on all ships from the United States.
Can you say more about that? I wasn't aware of that.
All I know is that the U.S. was charging more for Chinese ships, and so China said, okay, we don't like that, so we're going to charge more for U.S. ships. I'm not sure on what the exact amount is. All I know is that it's more than it was.
Now, I'm in favor of domestic manufacturing. I don't know that shock treatment is the way that we get there. More of a phased investment in infrastructure seems a little bit more sensible. But a sudden 100% tariff?
Yeah.
Just to answer the port fees, it looks like it's a $56 increase per net ton. It will rise to $157 per net ton by April 17, 2028. So that's a while. But the increase for the port fees of $56 per net ton is October 14th, 2025. So 3 days. And it looks like it's going to increase every year. It's going to happen every April 17th. They're going to increase by, it looks, $30 more until the April 17th one.
Until the 2028
one, yeah.
Or 2028, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a question of how to develop U.S. manufacturing. But what it seems to me like a fair metaphoric statement that Trump is essentially doing shock therapy. And why is he doing that? I don't know. But if I were to speculate, it would be to get people used to the idea of tariffs. Or, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm eventually going to do this because I've done this before. But these are such large tariffs. This is really going to disrupt businesses, international businesses, if their supply chains go through China. And because you don't know if he can suddenly do this now, he can suddenly do it again in the future. So what will the price of goods from China be long term? One cannot determine. One would be unwise to suppose that one can predict.
Well, okay, so it also raises into question how, I guess the issue is they hammered out a trade agreement or trade deal with China to stop the increase in tariffs the last time from, I think it was 145% or whatever it was, very high. And then that has been like this current situation, the status quo. And then suddenly something happen and Trump's up, let's throw that trade deal agreement out and go right back to 100% increase in tariffs on China. And it's at what point do these countries go, how can we agree to these trade deals or agreements we're making if you're just going to throw them out the window on what seems like a whim or a fan? I think is that what you're saying? That how can anyone accurately act in this market if
Yeah, that is part of it. That is part of it. There's this game, Civilization 2. There's a whole Civilization series, and at one point, if you like break 2 agreements or so with the AI, which, by the way, the AI isn't very good, but it compensates for not being very good by being very aggressive, and it also cheats. But so that's how they did AI in the 90s. But eventually they're like, although we have signed this document, we're fully aware that any agreement with you is not worth the paper it is printed on, and just act accordingly. So I think, is China eventually going to say that to us? Or is somebody going to... And it was flavor text, of course. And it didn't actually... The AI in Civ 2 was too aggressive for its own good. So, not literally. But I do think in terms of, if we're so unpredictable, 1, how can international business function? 2, how should the international order function? Alarm bells go off for that.
what's going to happen eventually is they may just move around the US, right? We need those markets just as much as they need us in some respects, but they don't need us as much as we need them because of our huge debt and the issues we have with just needing the economy to be working at like peak function so that everything keeps running swimmingly. What may happen is that we may not get as advantageous terms around the world. We'll just get whatever they hand us, right? If we even want access to their markets. Because what's going to happen is what we're seeing happen is soybean farmers aren't selling their soybeans anymore to China, right? China moved to Argentina to sell their soybeans. And there's other markets where they just won't buy our stuff anymore for maybe not even economic reasons. It may become political reasons, right? So let's say in the world market that there are goods that are in fact cheaper for China to buy from the US for whatever reason, but that they choose instead to go to a more expensive option precisely because of the shenanigans, right? Of what's going on with the tariffs and the economic policies and the port fees. If you make it prohibitively expensive for China to actually buy any of the stuff that we're selling, then they're just not going to buy what we're selling. They'll look for any other market, right? That's just the way it goes. It creates an opportunity for other countries to figure out how to take advantage, essentially, of what's going on. Because if you look at the market pre-tariffs were a tiny percent. It was minimal. It was like 1%, 2%, 0.5%. Like it wasn't a huge amount for most of the tariff policy around the world. But now it's more expensive. And when something becomes more expensive from the US, that creates an opportunity for everybody else, all the other countries in the world, to go, wait a second, we can actually swoop in and carve out our own little niche of making more money. And that's what's going to happen is when you make something cost prohibitive, if you make it just too high of a cost to transact business, then they'll go to the better option or the easier option or the less of a headache option. Where, especially, I think what's missing in this conversation is that because China's so big, they can actually go to smaller countries and they can demand much better terms simply by virtue of being that they can show up and say, we will give you the largest expenditure you've ever seen in the history of your country if you just give us advantageous terms and take it or leave it. They can't do that so much with the US because it's so big, but they can do it with other countries. We will flood your markets with just so much cheap stuff. Here you go. Have fun. We were selling it to the US, but I guess they don't want our stuff anymore. So we need to sell it somewhere. Here it goes to you, right? If China sells stuff to other countries and then the US tries to slap on tariffs of stuff sold to other countries as transshipment, it's going to be this huge headache of trying to figure out where did this good really come from? Where was it really made? Where was it actually sold? How was it sold? It's just a huge headache, right? And I understand why it's going to happen because there's a lot of money to be made. If the tariff policy actually goes into effect and they do succeed at part of the issue is that China is so big that they quite seriously could just sell anywhere else and be just fine. We saw that happen the first time around with the tariffs, where they didn't panic. They bided their time. They waited until the U.S. came back and said, "Please buy our stuff again." Is that what's going to happen here? Is that Trump's going to slap on the tariffs and then we're going to reach a point where this sucks. Let's go back again, and we're just going to keep doing that over and over again. I guess the other big issue is that the Supreme Court has yet to weigh in on the tariff ruling. That's the ruling that said that most of the Trump tariffs were completely illegal, that they can't go into effect. And that decision's been stayed, right? The ruling has been stayed until the Supreme Court weighs in, which means the Supreme Court needs to weigh in, right? They need to say yay or nay as the final sort of arbiter on whether these can even happen. And I think that's part of the uncertainty right now, is that we do not know if any of these tariffs will actually go into effect. And so if I was a business, what I would want to do is wait, right, until that ruling comes down before making any tangible decisions, or buy everything right now while the tariffs are still lower and park them in. Do you remember I talked about those tariff-free zones in the US where you can park your product in a warehouse until the conditions get better? I think some companies are probably going to do that. They're going to buy just a ton of stuff and park them in those warehouses until the situation improves. Even if the situation improving is the next administration, the next in 2028, the next political election. Because I am very skeptical that even a future Republican administration is going to be so extreme on tariffs. There will be at some point a return to like reasonable tariff rates, because this situation's untenable. You can't have 135% tariffs on all Chinese goods. Like, they're one of our top suppliers for most products in the U.S. It doesn't make any, and they also buy a ton of stuff from the U.S. It doesn't make any sense.
We agree about the instability created and the untenuousness of continuing apace in the current manner. But as to the reaction, the market reaction, I want to choose my words carefully here because I take pains not to encourage gambling. But we have heard the phrase, it is a very common phrase, time in the market beats timing the market. That I believe. However, if you could know, the stocks are about to drop, I should sell them, and then when they start to go up again, then I should come back. If you could somehow know that, you'd make, way more money. Now, companies have a fiduciary duty to their investors and to their stakeholders, let's say, to ensure the viability of their businesses. And it seems rather predictable to me that when Trump says, we're going to have a gigantic tariff now, this thing that you were not expecting, here it is, boom, that rational people would say, I don't like that, and they would sell some securities. That is a conclusion that I am struggling with, because it turns the time in the market beats timing the market on its head. So, have we entered the world of chaos, away from the world of predictable incremental growth, and people striving for predictable incremental growth?
Yes. So part of the issue, I think, with the Trump administration's tariff policy is that we don't know if this is a high-stakes negotiating tactic, that if this is the first opening gambit of Trump throwing out 100% tariffs and a date as a way between then and now. I think it says the 11th. We don't know if this is a high-stakes negotiating tactic to get China to back down on its export controls, right? So if the justification was China's export control letter that they apparently sent to the rest of the world, we don't know, and we won't know until we see if the tariffs actually go into effect on November 1st, that the tariffs are going to go into effect on November 1st. Because we have seen this in the past where he's had these high-stakes negotiation tactics. There was that thing he did with Canada where he said he was going to impose some kind of thing, and Canada backed down on they were going to impose a tax on the companies, and they backed down.
3% tax, yeah.
Yeah, we've seen it happen before where a country does a thing. We saw it with Colombia, actually, where Colombia was like, we're going to increase something because of the way that the deportees were being treated, so do better. And Trump's like, I'm going to slap a 50% tariff on you on all flowers and a bunch of other stuff, and then Colombia backed down. That could be something that he's doing, and we do not know until such a time as November 1st passes and the tariffs either go into effect or they don't go into effect, or they go into effect but at a lower rate. We don't know, because the whole issue with the tariff policy is that it's at his whim, right? There's no Congress law that's going to be passed. There's no constraint. He just decides it's going to be 100%. It's 100%. It's going to be 90%. It's 90%. Are there exceptions? Okay, there's exceptions, right? We don't know until it happens. And that's part of the uncertainty. So the answer to whether, and this is not financial advice, I'm not a financial advisor.
Yes, this is not financial advice. No, not financial
Not
advice.
at all. But
Yeah.
stocks are risky. It's all a risk. And the assumption of risk is the possibility that something else could happen, right? For instance, Trump saying there will be 100% increase in tariffs and then that not happening. Because if that's the case, if this really is just a negotiation tactic for some kind of trade agreement, trade deal, some kind of way to amend the existing agreement, then that's different than 100% tariffs on all goods across the board. And so the economic impact and the reaction would also be different in that case. And we don't know. And because we don't know, because it's not set in stone, there's nothing to say it can't change between then and now. Everything's a risk. That's the answer I have.
Yeah. And it throws the efficient market hypothesis through a loop, because you hear it's priced in. But if you don't know which of your assumptions will endure until the next diktat, then what is it to price things in?
Right now, it looks like it's just the fear. It's just the possibility of it. That people didn't know that it was going to be a possibility because they thought it was over and done with the trade agreement, and now it's back on the table. That's it. At some point, countries are going to get annoyed with what's happening. They're just going to figure out a way around the U.S., right? Because what happened this year with tariffs is completely, unpredictable. It's very confusing because the tariffs are on, the tariffs are off, the tariffs are back on, they're off. There's exceptions in the tariffs. There's no exceptions. There's some exceptions. And it's a recipe for complete confusion and economic uncertainty. Part of the issue is that it certainly looks like if Trump is creating exceptions in some cases when situations become advantageous for Trump. We saw that with the chips that were sent to the country, where it was like, wait a second, why are these high-end microchips being sent to this country? The question arises, what's going on here? That level of uncertainty means that other countries are going to be very cautious in how they interact with the U.S. at some point and just decide they're not going to play ball, right? They're just going to create like really good deals with each other and just go around the U.S. The U.S. isn't the whole world economy. It's just part of the world economy. That's my thought.
Mondays with Mike.